Welcome to the Indigenous Peoples Traditional Knowledge and Ocean Climate Action event. My name is Dr. David Wilson. I am a maritime historian focused on colonialism and marine spaces, and I am also a co-investigator on One Ocean Hub, which is an international programme of research for sustainable development, which is working to promote fair and inclusive decision-making for a healthy ocean, whereby both people and the planet can flourish. Our programme of research is currently focused on Ghana, Namibia and South Africa. But this session is not really about that research specifically. Instead, when myself and Mia Strand, who you can see on the screen as well, who is an early career researcher with Nelson Mandela University and One Ocean Hub, who specialises in knowledge co-production through arts-based participatory research approaches for more equitable area-based ocean management. When Mia and I were asked and invited to lead on this session for One Ocean Hub, we decided that we wanted to use this opportunity to practice the art of listening. So rather than hear predominantly from academic researchers, we wanted to hear the stories, experiences and perspectives of knowledge holders and researchers from Indigenous and local communities directly. There will be some time at the end to discuss, really focusing on some of the main takeaways, reflections and thoughts of attendees that were raised while listening to these reflections and interventions. So please do post these in the chat and also post any questions that are being raised as you listen to these interventions as well. We may not be able to answer these questions directly, but I think it's important that the space is there to raise the questions, and that allows us all to ruminate on them both here and as we leave the session too. Now, due to issues of time, capacity and data, 3 of the 4 reflections today have been pre-recorded. So some of the participants couldn't join us live. However, we have been able to gather videos which convey some of the key issues that speakers wanted to express. So I am very grateful and privileged to be able to share these with you this morning, or afternoon, or evening, depending where you are. Our first reflection, however, will be offered live. Now, due to transportation issues, we are attempting to do so with a phone. So hopefully this will work out, but please bear with us as we try to make this connection. I'm going to pass over to Professor Alex Kanyimba from the University of Namibia to introduce the speaker and also to facilitate the phone call. So hopefully all will work there, but please do bear with us.
Yeah, good morning, colleagues from One Ocean Hub. My name is Alex Kanyimba. I'm an associate professor in management of sustainable development. I'm connected to One Ocean Hub as a country director here, and we've been working closely with the One Ocean Hub. I'm in the Toknara community, who are actually classified in Namibia as the sea people of the Namibian community, and for some other reasons, due to colonialism, they've been, disempowered, been moved away from the ocean. And with me here, I would like to ask Glenn, who is the Toknara youth, who has been working with us, if we can say one word or two, just to introduce himself before I ask Mr. Herman Harseb, who is the senior counselor of the traditional community, traditional authority, to reflect on some of their heritage. Glenn, if you can hear, can you just introduce yourself for a few seconds?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Glenn Casper from the Toknara Youth. I serve in various different positions in the Toknara and also an inhabitant of the original people of the Namibian coastal line, known as the Hurinin in our language, and also the Gomen. So I represent my people through the One Ocean Hub, through researchers and through indigenous knowledge, as we have a very rich history, as I've mentioned already, and also for the intangible heritage to be preserved for future generations. That's me, Glenn Casper, from the Toknara. Thank you.
I'm Good morning again. I'm Herman Arizet, staying in Kuisep, Topna district, upon at Roipang, which is also situated in the Kuisep district, growing up in the area, and then going my school in Tamaraland, but back again and settled here for almost the past years in the Kuisep area. I also done guiding tours, helping some of the students from different colleges also with some information. So you are welcome to ask questions.
Yeah, the first question is the relationship between your relationship of the Topnar community to the oceans.
The relationship of the Topnar with the ocean is a long historical background. Topnars are known as also beach kumba. People moving alongside the beach for centuries, harvesting mussels, fish, as well as seabed also to make their survival from. But nowadays, after independence or before independence, when the areas was proclaimed as parks, then the whole story of to catch the fish or to be alongside the ocean is a difficult one. That's why we have lost some of that opportunity to fish as our ancestors have done that time around. So and we as the Topnar community are living alongside the ocean. It was also known, our ancestors was also known as strandlopers, beach kumbas. That's why some of the European sailors, when they see or saw the people on the beach, they've just known them as Hottentots, but they was no ever Hottentots. There was Topnar community. Some of them was also other tribes, but every person they have seen alongside the beach of Namibia, out of Namibia, the settlers have always called them as Hottentots. But really, there was the Topnar people almost. Well, of course, 1820 to 1830, they were settled there around the mouth of Spapop River, and from there they have come again to the mouth of Kuisep River, settled there for centuries, and that make a little bit something is taken away from us. Of course, we have no entering to some of the very important sites where our ancestors have made a living, called Sandwich Harbor. We are also known that we have gotten right to harvest. There is some of examples, some of the places where you can visit to see examples of where lots of mussels are, things are where they have made necklace and stuff from it, and then also some of the fish bones, lot of fish bones and stuff. So we have got our ancestors have got lot of fishing, and also what's known as also kumbas, like I've said, and strandlopers. So I think something is taken away from us. But as heritage, our own government give us some quota, but this is not enough to get it. But like I said, we have lost it according to the park rules and the regulation. We must have some of the guys must have some permit if you want to go to fish. But that time around, our ancestors in the late 1900 century, there was also no permit system, and it was open for the Topnar people. But nowadays we cannot do it anymore according to our park rules and regulations. Any question about that?
I think you he's touched on 3 questions. I think also on the challenges, also on the heritage. In what way do you think what are the challenges now? Basically, maybe to reflect on that one a little bit more. The challenges that you are facing to access the oceans.
Some of the challenges to access to the ocean, that the government manage the fishing industry nowadays. That's what it makes a challenge for us. Because like every other tribe in Namibia, we must follow that rules and regulations, which is there on the table of our own government. So there's a big challenge for us. There's also not only the fish they are around the Sandwich Harbor, there's also the natural resource which we harvest they are around, but we cannot enter that area anymore. It's a big challenge for us.
Okay, maybe the last one is, other than the fishing, what other aspect of your knowledge and understanding that you used to derive from the ocean?
Come again?
Other than the fishing, what else are some other aspects of your knowledge, part of your knowledge, which you actually was connecting you to the ocean? Like maybe we can reflect on the Nara and so forth. How difficult are you as the Topner community to access the Nara along the harbor?
Come back again to the Nara.
Yeah.
We still a very good access to the Nara, because like the German, like the American, like the British people, they have already recognized how to utilize the Nara sustainable. So our own government also recognized that one, that only us, the Topner community, must harvest the Nara. No other tribe in Namibia. It's a very important one, that one. Secondly, a very nice thing which happened is that the Nagoya Protocol is there in place to safeguard our natural resources. That's one of the important aspects. Of course, there are some of the tribes which enter from Wolf's side and then try to harvest the Nara, but they don't know the traditional method which we have heritage from century to century back to this generation. So they don't know that method. Now, our own government said anybody who harvests the Nara, the Topner, must harvest the Nara according to the old traditional method. That is what we, the Topner, are still doing till today. Like there is a 6 fragment found they get the 8,000 years at Mirabel Hill Shelter. So that time you can imagine how long already utilize the Nara. So the access to the Nara is there. The marketing purposes, that's where the problem began to start. But in the near future, we try to compress our own oil from the nut, from the seed. We condense omega-6 oil, which is very good for the human skin. But still today, there's a lack of that press, as well as the filter to filter the oil and then make our own cosmetics to uplift our living style of the Topner.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Hariseb. I think maybe you have reflected on the 3 questions that we wanted to know. Thank you for availing yourself. David, maybe I can pass over to you, or maybe I can ask Glenn also to reflect because he's working with us. Maybe for a few seconds, just some reflections from his side.
Yeah.
For Glenn.
Yes. Thank you, Prof.
I'll get back to you.
Yes. Just to mention one important point also that about the history of the sea people. These people were also recognized by Queen Victoria. There is also this paper that says that the top knot are the original people. This is just a historical fact. And it's a fact that is written on paper that these were the first people that the Britain met at the Namibian coastal line when they were trying to annex this coastal line. But due to colonialism again, as years goes by and independence started to come into order, these people were again chased out in the Namib Desert, as our councillor has just mentioned, that we are now living in the Namib Desert. So one of also the difficulties that we are not accessing the ocean is that factories has taken over. People are having fishing quarters, but the top knots are not included in this decision making by our government, which we are in right now. So what the top knots now only have is that they only have 10% shareholding, which is a dividend that they're getting from a social responsibility trust fund, which is not even uplifting the whole top knot community. So what we are also trying to through this Ocean Hub is we are trying to say that if we could be helped so that every factory that has a share or a quarter in Wolfish Bay at least give some percentage or dividends to the top knot, not only by one trust fund. This one trust fund cannot only uplift the whole community. That's impossible. A community that has such a rich history and a rich connection with the ocean, not only historically, but up to today. It's just that we are not included in this decision making. So inclusivity in the legislation, laws, and so on, that will be a very great thing from a traditional aspect side. I just wanted to add that. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you much, my David, and over back to you, unless there's some follow-up question you would like to ask.
And thank you very much, Prof. Alex, for facilitating the phone call. Thank you to Mr. Aristeb and Mr. Casper for joining us today and for sharing those reflections. Please do put any questions or reflections based on that intervention in the chat, and we can kind of come back to that at the end of the session as well. Next, we have the first of 3 pre-recorded videos. This has been shared by Mr. Symphorium Nihala Manira Soa, who comes from a fishing family in the coastal village of Andavaduaka in southwest Madagascar. From an early age, Symphorian was drawn to photography and film as a way of documenting the lives and talents of his peers and their intersection with life in the sea. He currently works as an outreach media technician for Blue Ventures, creating accessible outreach tools such as radio shows, films, and music videos to engage fishers in marine conservation and resource management, which we'll hear a little bit about in the video. Just to say, Blue Ventures is a marine conservation organisation that puts people first. They support coastal fishers in remote and rural communities to rebuild fisheries, restore ocean life, and build lasting pathways to prosperity. Their work began 2 decades ago in Madagascar's coastal communities and is growing globally now. And we can see the importance of this work when we listen to Symphorian's reflections. Senya, could you please play the video that Symphorian has sent? Thank you.
I grew up in coastal village in the southwest Madagascar. I'm part of Vezu tribe. The word Vezu means to paddle. So our tribe devansa us and our close relationship with the ocean. Vezu is also a word used to call people who can dive, fish, glean, and can make and sell boats. We fish, dive, and glean to make a living. It's what we think about when we first wake up, and it's what we dream about when we go to sleep. My father was a big fisherman in our village. He was well known for his very good fishing skills and his knowledge of the ocean. He always caught a lot when he went out fishing because he always knew where to find a school of fish depending on the weather. He could tell what species was underwater even it was far away from him. Sea turtles are very important in Vez culture. My father lived by the Vez traditions, using only certain type of boat when going out to harpoon a turtle, and only going so on special occasions. He passed away when I was 9 years old, so I learned to fish from my older half-brother to become a vessel to be able to support my family when I was still trying to get through school. I also learned about all the fish species and different sea creatures using a book from the dive expedition centers in our village. Now I'm working for the Marine Conservation Organization Blue Ventures as outreach media officer. I create facilitation tools for our community, such as film, music video, radio show, and presentation to teach them about how to manage our marine conservation in a sustainable way. Vez culture traditionally contribute to ocean protection and resource management. Fishers here used to have area where they all go to make offering to the ancestors, dropping queens to clean the area, and asking the ancestor to make the area productive so the fish all disappears to where they all the fish. These were traditional no-take zone protected by belief, common respect for the ocean and the ancestors. Certain types of shark were also protected by story of their importance to Vez people, and like I mentioned before, the sea turtle is very important in Vezu culture and was protected. However, as the number of fish has decreased, life of Vez people has got harder. People have begun to break these taboos either accidentally or deliberately. People have realized that nothing immediately bad has happened to them and the traditional have eroded. Part of my role at Blue Ventures is to help teach the community why things like no-take zone are still important. On regional scale, we have a locally managed marine area called Velunjek. The area includes mangrove reserves, no-take zones on coral reef and partially fisheries closures, mainly for octopus. It is run by a community-led association, and rules about management and resource use are defined by a locally developed a set of law called EDINA, which is now legally blending. The protected area is recognized by the Malagasy government but managed by Blue Ventures and the Committee Association. This means knowledge of the Vezu people directly contributes to the management of the locally managed marine area. Having the Community Association managing Velunjek empower the local communities in ocean governance. However, barriers for traditional knowledge do appear when local law contend with national and international law. For example, the locally made DINA law were originally informed by community taboos. For example, no-take zone were located where traditional taboo area were, and DINA for turtle ensured they were caught sustainably and according to local tradition. But the local taboos often are competing with top-down ideas from resource management, which might not be in line with traditions. We need to be careful that local marine management law respect the traditional way, but also support sustainability and conservation goals. I think this will help get support from the community, making the project more sustainable in the future. To bridge the gap between traditional knowledge and climate and ocean action, it's very important for projects to have community members at the forefront and empower them with knowledge to make decisions. For example, we have a local science team trained by Blue Volunteers to do ecological monitoring in protected area. We also train fishers in basic marine science, mapping and monitoring so they understand the change happening and what this might mean for their livelihoods. We have found film, radio, and music are very good way to engage people in the conversation about conservation and the way for community members to share their voice. For example, some members of the community came to me as they wanted to record a song and release a music video about the importance of mangroves, so I can help them with that project. Recently, we have also been using a participatory video where youth have been interviewing elders about the marine ecosystem and how it has changed and making short films. This is working well as the youth are engaging and learning from the elders. Ensure the tradition knowledge is not lost.
Excellent. Thank you very much to Symphorium for producing and sharing this fantastic video, which really stresses the importance of existing practices and values that can be reinforced and supported to continue to encourage sustainable ocean usage, and also for sharing thoughts on the importance of art and music in sharing these values and practices worldwide. So I hope you'll all go and check out some more of Symphorium's work and the Blue Ventures project as well. Next, I'm going to pass over to Mia to introduce our next speakers as well. Thanks, Mia.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. David introduced me earlier. I'm Mia Strand with Nelson Mandela University, and I have the honor to introduce the next video. The following video is a presentation from Chrisilla Billings and Chief Brendan Billings. Chrisilla is an Indigenous Khoisan traditional healer from Gqeberha, South Africa. And Chrisilla has an incredible gift that she shares with others for healing purposes. And she has strong spiritual, traditional, and historical connections to the ocean and the coast. Chief Brendan Billings of the Namaskar Korana in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa possesses vital knowledge of the historical heritage of South Africa and has made it his mission to share this with the younger generation. So Senya, if you can share the video, and please enjoy.
Good day, leadership. Thank you for this opportunity just to explain my connection with the ocean and my knowledge. I always have a connection with the ocean and the balance of the ocean and also the energy of the ocean. My experience relation with management in ocean management in South Africa, especially in Algoa Bay, is zero, due to the exclusion and materialization of our indigenous community that participates in points. We're grateful for the acceptance of the Khoisan Traditional Leadership Act 3, the inclusion of the community in decision making. That's for the ocean management and also disaster management, etc. As mentioned of the non-existing relationship with the ocean management, we do engage with governmental institutions or departments. Our deep spiritual connection with the nature and the ocean that guide us for centuries and determine our survival. Our deep indigenous knowledge with nature and the ocean demand us to have a great place where we can perform our customs and rituals as our forefathers done before. The significance of the fish trap at the Cape Reef is testament of these rituals and customs that proves the intellectual scientific minds of our forebears that is now restricted from us. We also are grateful for participating on the art-based research project that has enlightened us our responsibility towards the protection of our ocean environment. And I've learned more about the climate changes, and also we exchange spiritually knowledge of the ocean and also the energy that is below the surface, the balance that must be in the ocean. For centuries, our people lived out of the ocean, and now the coastline is restricted and controlled by private owners. We really need more research, and we also need more to reach out to the community of today. And my experience with the ocean is a spiritually connection, how the calmness and also the roughness of the ocean. I also see the ocean as a mother that is giving birth to children, and that's my connection to the ocean. And if there is something in the ocean that is it must not be there, then she will get that thing out. So I thank you for letting me talk a little bit about what the ocean really means for us as the Khoi and San community in South Africa.
Good day, leadership. Firstly, I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for making this day possible, especially to Mia and Dr. Rivers and the Khoi and San communities and the leaders abroad the country. Today, I want to say that for me, the fish traps play a significant role in our indigenous cultures. In 2015, there was a book launch with the University of Architectures at the Nelson Mandela University, and the Khoi and San community also took part of this book. This book name is Spirit of Waters. The book explains in detail about how we used to practice our cultures and rituals at the Cape Reef and along the Nelson Mandela beaches. This was also the first time that this site was studied and the drawings were mapped. For me, the fish traps play a magnificent role, especially when we have full moon rituals, when we go to the traps at night, when the tide is high and the fish blow over the rocks, and the next day during the low tide, we have a whole pool of fish for over hundreds of Khoi and San community. Lastly, I wanna end off with the international law of indigenous people rights are laid out in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and it was adopted in 2017. Indigenous peoples' land ownership rights are recognized under the international law. States cannot relocate indigenous peoples without our free prior consent and without offering us adequate compensation. The land that we live on is a home over 80% of our planet biodiversity and rich in natural resources such as oil, gas, timber, and sea and minerals. However, these lands are routinely appropriated, sold, leased, or simply plundered and polluted by governments and private companies. Many of our indigenous people have been uprooted from our lands due to discriminatory policies or armed conflict. We as indigenous people faces violence and even murders when we seek to defend our land. Our human rights are often being abused when we try to perform our cultures. there was a growing number of our indigenous people who have now been moved away from our coastline to move into the cities and town. We then faces many challenges when we have to practice our cultures at the Cape Reef fish traps. This also leads to poverty, marginalization, and violence, and sometimes the extinction of as a people. It is now a privatization of private land owners. Lastly, I want to say thank you to Mia and the team for working with Ocean Research Project for the past few years. I must say I've learned a lot from them, and are always thankful for granting me this opportunity to work with them. I thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mia. I'm going to pass over to you in case you wanted to reflect on this.
Firstly, I just want to say a big thank you to Priscilla and Chief Brendan. They should not thank me and the team. We should thank them both for sharing their stories and your important knowledge. I've had the absolute pleasure of working with both Priscilla and Chief Brendan since April 2021, and I've learned so much in the process. And I think, yeah, one of the main takeaways or important takeaways, like has been highlighted by both Priscilla and Chief Brendan today, is the violent history of forced removals in South Africa, and how this has meant that indigenous communities and populations have been removed from the coast and their historical and cultural heritage, making it difficult or impossible to translate this to the next generations. Similar to the histories of the Topnar communities as well in Namibia, despite indigenous people's strong spiritual, historical, cultural, and ancient relationships to the ocean and coast, they have limited access to these places and important places such as the ancient fish traps in Algoa Bay. And indigenous communities also often have limited say in ocean governance mechanisms and decision-making, like it seems in both South Africa and Namibia. This therefore needs to change, and I believe that one of the first things that needs to happen is deep listening to indigenous people and representatives like this event today. But this also is just as important at regional, national, international decision-making platforms, and indigenous representation needs to increase urgently. Also, I wanted to say we're very lucky to have Priscilla and Chief Brendan here today. So if you do have any questions or comments to them, please put it in the chat or the Q&A function. And yeah, hopefully they can answer, respond to anything. So yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for amazing presentations. And yeah, over to you, David.
Excellent, thank you, Mia, and just thank you again to Priscilla and Chief Brendan for those reflections too. Our final reflection today comes from Elmina in Ghana, and I am going to pass over to Dr. Bola Erenosho, who is a lawyer and researcher with the Faculty of Law in the University of Cape Coast and the University of Derby Law School as well. She is co-director for Ghana for the One Ocean Hub, where she researches on plural legal systems for oceans governance and human rights-based approaches to protecting small-scale fishers. Over to you, Bola. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining our panel today. Our final pre-recorded video is a video by Mrs. Peace Ablagavo, Auntie Peace as we often call her. Auntie Peace is a fish processor and women leader from Elmina, which is in the central region of Ghana. Elmina is the third largest beach landing site, and it's a very deep and intricately artisanal community where artisanal fishers operate. It also has a long history of fisheries which date back to even interactions with the colonial government. And so I would let Auntie Peace's video play first and then come back to speak about some of the important points Auntie Peace has raised. That's in here.
Chapogne evito evino abaleke evifofo previdada okwo vidia na mai na nyemo nchu ve itopo okpon lagboni nyɔnu hã wokpɔ gome yi ne alebe nyanu ɖu ne mí ɖeviwo. Ne woyɔm be ŋudoni dada, míaƒe menye ŋudoni dɔwɔla deto alo deŋgɔ. Ŋkɔe nye Peace Abla Gavon. Metso Keta Abujakɔƒe Volta region. Mele Cape Coast Elmina Muframa Trim Central region. Ye me xɔ ƒe bla atɔ̃ vɔ enyi. Tsaƒua enye nu ke míawɔ le Mawu wɔ na mí. Míamewo le tsaƒua tɔa wòva nye míaƒe dɔwɔɖui. Nyɔnu ƒe ɖe atsaƒu ƒe nyɔnu ƒe gɔmesesea. Efia be nene ƒe atsaƒua yi me Mawu wɔ ŋudoni vovovowo le me. Abe ne ŋutsu kplɔe, ŋutsu mate ŋu afɔ kplɔrɔ, vɔ afɔ za kplɔrɔ, agawɔ ŋutsi do. Eva wɔe be nyɔnua enye me ke nene ƒe ŋudoniwo dogo tso tsaƒua ma, nyɔnu ke ame ke belele kɔ ge ne akpɔ gbɔ afi wònye ŋuɖuɖu ne míaɖu. Atsaƒua ŋutsuwo kpɔna no derwo kpɔna ŋudoni tso me. Alebe nyɔnuwo kpɔ gome tso nene ƒe ŋudoni ma me. Abe ne ŋutsuwo ɖe lã nyɔnuwo meƒli o, efia ŋutsuwo meva wɔ dɔ ɖeke o. Ta nyɔnuwo ƒe elãma ƒeƒle akɔ gbe aƒe me. Ewɔ ne be ŋutsuwo te kpɔ gaƒo na ƒe kotoku ye nyɔnuwo va kpɔna nene ƒe lã gbɔ ekɔkɔ enyiawo viwoe. Mí nyɔnua, mí nyɔnu lã yi dɔwɔlawoa, kuxe ɖeka vetɔ̃ ele mía ŋu le míaƒe dɔwɔna me. Vevietɔ míaƒe nuyɔe míezãna ne dɔwɔna. Nene ƒe numua ne ƒle material mo katã ebu eŋlɔ. Ene wò dɔ be keke ƒe ɖeka ɖo na ɖe nene ƒe gãwo katã le ma. Eva wɔe be ŋgobi aɖeke meva ŋutsi me abe xema me ke koe mí ŋu ɖu mele. Ele be dziɖuɖua na se míaƒe gbe. Nuyɔ mí kɔkɔ dɔ wɔmea, edziɖeɖe nava. Abele wo redzi na maro na ŋutsuwo na edziɖeɖe nava ne míwa. Be ne mío hã mío doa, míakpɔ ŋgɔgbe yiyi. Mí nyɔnua, wo míaƒe gbe se mo eve na mí. Elabe YNET mí kɔkɔ lã yi me. Fifia ne be ƒle ɖekea, eva nye 450 Ghana cedi. Yike be exɔ nu, wònye be dziɖuɖua na kpe ɖe mía ŋuti. YNET aɖewo tso eƒugodo ye Ghana hã wo wɔm. Abele wo se ŋutsu ƒe gbe ko abɔ moto no, wo se míaƒe gbe ko YNET ne mío game na bɔbɔ. Gake hama katã womo wɔne ewɔm na mi, fishes wɔm na mi. Ye ne nane hia be ŋuɖuɖu ne hã, ŋutsuwo ko mi nyamo le akɔ ne bo ye yo tutsia ono xɔ no gbeɖe gake mi nyɔnuwo mo te kɔ nana kana mi be mi xɔ mi anɔ gbeɖe ŋafi yo ga ƒutsi o. Ta va nye veve sesena míaƒe dzi. Le ŋutsuwo gomea, menya leke wo wɔne na wo vɔ nu me va nye be woƒe emɔ ya wo kuna abɔ moto kuna tɔ dzi. Kple woƒe premise nya wo le dzi nɔ gbɔgblɔm abɔ moto dziɖuɖua ke nye fishes dɔwɔƒea ona abɔ moto ga home ye na va ƒli le fi bubu xɔmua wo redzi no edrano ye ami hã wo redzi fo mo bubu ga va nye kuxe no mo komo na wo ga ƒli eche ga drano ta fi ŋutsu tɔ eye wo me abɔ moto ko no ga bɔbɔ kɔ wo redzi kpɔtɔ. Nyɔnu aɖewo lia, mi nyɔnu aɖewo lia, ahosiwo le mía dome. Ike be dzikpɔla meva eli na o. Gake ne nye be dziɖuɖua ko ŋuɖuɖua ɖe via, ahosi mo te kpɔna naneke tso emu ke boŋ ŋutsu ko nya me ke woko ŋɔna ko wo gatsi anyi dzima kpɔla tɔe. Le míaƒe kuxiwo me ne míeyi ɖe takpekpo me, míedona míaƒe kuxiwo ɖa. Abe míetɔ dɔ mea, dziɖuɖu le ŋgɔ na mi le etɔ dɔwɔna me abe fishes ene. Ne míeko míaƒe kuxiwo do ɖa, wosene vɔ womo wɔ dzi o. Womo wɔ dzi o ko fia be míaƒe gbea, womo sem na mi o. Míegblɔna nya, se ne gbe ma gbe nu enye mia foku he kaka ba owo jina mia eji wo wore kama value nyemanya etaroji tututu ele mia fe ndoni do fo ngogba to shi ekan ala bo nyanyi be menye nchu re ka kwenya meke ndoni do mo no ye gbo mi nyonwo manu mia nchu mo va odore ko na nchu itoji gbo mi ve flio roko flori ge mo choga onana ki kakria o mo tentru nkure mi nyonwo na fi be ne mi ve flio ndoni mo nye galo kutokmo no nchu mo ten ko nana kra mi choga bu ngo ga pepamre nchu nchawo miao mi aba je gban le baba sesam nanyi be mi le mi afa community ema emi itakpekpe kuhe de ka voro mi dura mi nchu kronyo nwo mi peta mi do nyamara nchu ni mo kwani dana edo na mana mi le kporanu ma mi afa gba o mi dana vua nchu olia owe dana gba vu na avu to ofio kwani ajoni yene baro yare ya ga homola oteba be gama mo hogota ho ga na nyuno na kwevi na mo nyuno ma ga kwevi ma ba hana bibli eviare amu nyuna ukone mo nyuno ba ko vuvo no ko vuvo ko ke abazu kuhie kra bo yo dom kwakli mi be mi agbakogni ofo dore ko mi le ba ne mi ga dagare jiya mi anonyi abale mi nonyi egban na ifia mu de kam ga ko gbana ko so ru kuji aba hoyala yene ga ko vuvo amama to ga ba na gba ba hoyala da ba we ba mu ba mi ba gbasam la community am nchu ala ba wasam ya fa gbe aba ayo yitoje gbo ne mi nyonwe mi nwa plabo a mo dore ko ta para kamali ukoga yi abele mi nyonwu ne mi premi koro tata po vuvu no ofuchi anko chi golata ele bo osam ya fa gba no ko wo gbe a mi ate won fi won na tan pogumo abe epagedova yene le dokplo hamale mi afa etotofia wo dana la wo sunagbo mi nyonwu mi no ndo bu keke nwu kanare miaji kake fie mi la fia afi na yire tofo ayire chianu ava yakpola agbo ba po me eva sesa nchu oyo yimra etoji a re avugan la chiaji fe nu gbegblanta ala yo vuvi over de akovina mi nyuha mi yia ovugan ba homo shi de muta o bo ho ba ko chikofo eva de moto mo eba ala katala toma evu akpaga to kunare chiama kayo le bo nonyi ajire chiama meten jijimidi refu ganto fo efure na mata e ba vuvi to ha wo kporo nti ko mi fa etodo ona edidira anyi gba kra nenye be ofugato mojuju ero ala so poplo le vuvi ta ye vuvi ko chikavo etoji me na mi mo de ka nu mo to a efie ba mi fa edo fe a rokra do pa efie ba gbana toto ga kplokla ala ba epasha pa ejidem va se fiata na mutoko agbana yiro ga mi ga la ka kpoga chapoma ayire dogo ke fia ba mi amole etotua e va defunami le mi fe Coastal area le Ghana ma e mi ru nafta haboboa mi apatanye ba say no to bad fish. Say no to bad fish ma mi amo le hama elikerema be association na la manwa mi plenu ke amo le tapo buvoa no vra echato mi plogo ploma mi glom no a omo esamna mi ela ba never plan ala ba mana ma report walo kaka nsekela chenjiru ro mana ma nsota imete na ga ba one elo o wane be mi amarolia na la monyu kwa mi plenu ta potomopoto ho na segoma ko ke no ve ku nchuku la manyo ko ve ne mi ploko wala bo wana jujo ele manyo abe na yire etotofia odon la gagba ma bale na kwena echi ala la nwa no ze achike vua eche wana iba deti kalana yene ke ibe gem goods o wana yibo ibe nkuvi ebianare elapo nkuvi ebiana ke fie bana na ponuma woza chikeni kakene mu za chikeni lo elan to ba wiele la mania ibe che de kudina re chiamako o wana na kpoko nyanya gaba la chikemolemo mi nyongo pa la yilo pa do fue o fue nyi ba na nyi ba nchu ve doro o kporo fo ko ala manyu ko ve na mi ka ta mi gbe mi flio ke e chen kala ba nchu na jujo mo ga do fo plogo na nyi ba jirudu asina mi ka ta mi cho shi la shi ma o doro ke mi afa chafu mi ga kpon rujo ma abale kene amoli ma wo kashi ofajiu ye wajibo okpere yo se mi afa kuhe le mi afa toshinya omu a meji vevie be mi afa kuhe ke mi kokom na wa wo kpere mi anchi be mi afa toshinya wa wo ga yide ngogbe na mi.
Excellent. My very big thanks to Auntie Peace, who has who pre-recorded a video for us. Auntie Peace has been working with the One Ocean Hub for quite some time now on some of the challenges which the women in fisheries are facing. I think what comes through in that video is, one, the close connection of the communities in Ghana, both in Elmina and across the coast of Ghana, with the ocean. It is central to their livelihoods for many of these communities where fishing is a core profession. So as an economic activity, it is central, but it is also important to them in addition, as it is central to their belief systems, it is central to their culture and their traditions and their festivals as well. And so they are quite strongly and deeply connected with the ocean and its resources. However, in Ghana in particular, fishing activities are highly gendered, and Auntie Peace alluded to that in her video. And so only the fishermen are allowed to go to sea, and the women participate in what we call the post-harvest sector of fisheries. And so they process the fish, they market it, they sell it, and all of that. And of course, some of the women also fund fishing expeditions and also finance the boats. However, because of that gendered nature of fisheries, the women have often been excluded from decision making. And you can see how passionate Auntie Peace was about that feeling of exclusion. Often decision making in the past had focused on men, and subsidies which had often been offered to fishermen had only been offered for the fishing. And so fuel subsidies, for example, were only given to the fishermen, and nothing was offered to fisherwomen and their parts of the value chain. And so she highlighted that disconnect and that feeling of disenchantment and exclusion. Now, I should say that more recently attempts have been made to, through the social networks and the leadership, create leadership associations on leadership frameworks for women to try to be more inclusive and include them in decision making. Unfortunately, it hasn't yet gone long enough because the laws have not yet been amended to reflect that inclusion of women, particularly local women, in decision making around fisheries. And I guess it highlights in particular, and the tail end of that video in particular, she highlights how important women can be to sustainable utilization of the oceans, because of how crucial they are to the whole value chain and interactions around the ocean. They are perhaps in the best position, as she argues, to be able to mitigate challenges around illegal and unregulated and unreported fisheries, for example, but also if there are any interventions in terms of climate mitigation and climate adaptation, the women are perhaps key to any of those interventions. And so we're at the hub are particularly keen to reflect and highlight the importance of women in small-scale fishing communities in Ghana to any interventions around the ocean. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula, and thank you to PSAPLA Gabor again for sharing those perspectives. I want to say thank you again very much to all of our speakers, both those who could be here and those who shared their reflections through video as well. We could now spend some time reflecting on these interventions, so please do share any questions or thoughts. If you have thoughts, please share them in the chat. If you've got questions, please use the Q&A function to ask questions, and we'll do our best to reflect on and answer these as best we can. I believe there is already at least one question. Yep, and the Q&A, which I believe Professor Alex, you would like to answer live. So I'll pass over to you just now, Prof. Alex, if you're happy to do so.
What was the question again?
Oh, sorry, let me just get the question. So the question had been, have standardized methodologies or protocols been produced in any way that govern how businesses engage the ocean environment with carbon dioxide removal strategies? Where might they be found? And Darren had asked this question in relation to how they consider Indigenous populations, where their work might have an impact.
Unfortunately, that is an area of the research that we One Ocean Hub, especially we're going to look at, especially one of the themes that we're going to undertake through our collaboration agreements. I mean, our research will be the low carbon, and that is an area that's actually not researched in Namibia. So for the past centuries up to now in the Namibian Ocean, there has been only some fishing activities undertaken in the Namibian Sea, and this has been mainly commercial fishing. So we are actually very much different from all the other African countries because we're commercially driven and export driven. And some studies that have been undertaken were only on the vulnerability of the fish stocks. There have been no studies on socio-economic aspects of it, and there have been no studies on the carbon sequestration in the Namibian Sea. So maybe that's an area that is not yet explored. At the moment, there are efforts to engage the Topner community in terms of their access to the ocean, but not on fishing. It's only on the areas of the harbor where the Ngara plant is growing. So in terms of carbon reduction and carbon sequestration, that is an area that is unexplored in the Namibian Ocean. Thank you. Is there another question?
Thank you, Prof. Alex. I think you've answered that question well there, and there's not another question as of yet, but if anyone does have any other questions, please do ask them in the chat or in the Q&A function as well. See that Mia has asked a sort of reflection question to everyone, which is how do we make sure that, in fact, Mia, do you want to do that? Why not?
No, I just wanted, in case any of the presenters today or anyone that's here today, was just quite a big reflection question, I guess. But yeah, how do we ensure that Indigenous communities like the Topnar and the Khoisan and Symphorium in the Veso culture and fisherwomen in Ghana, how do we ensure that they're better heard and recognized and can influence international ocean decision making?
So I could just say a little something on that, Mayor. I think one of the one of the great things, without tooting our horn, about this panel is creating, that space, that platform to be able to, because often what we find, particularly with many international conferences of this kind, is that many communities are often excluded from participating. I mean, whether it's because of logistic reasons, or it could even be cost reasons. And so often, yes, there will be civil society representation, the big civil society organizations, but actual community members, actual leaders from many communities are not, they would often feel disconnected from these kinds of large global decision-making processes. And so that's perhaps what informs our reasoning for having these kinds of spaces where the actual voices and not just us reporting the research is reflected. And so that's perhaps a great first start. But I think from my perspective also as a law researcher, I think the importance of human rights in this context, and I say that in terms of if we can't understand and appreciate that these challenges are human rights challenges and apply a human rights framework to it, then the great thing about human rights, I think, is for many countries, at least many of the both developing countries and developed countries, there is often a very robust and strong human rights framework, which is perhaps embedded in constitutions and as well as in international law. And so if you're able to apply those human rights protections to some of these challenges ocean communities face, including the right to participation, the right to inclusion in decision-making processes, etc. And of course, for women in particular, the rights, equality and non-discrimination, etc. Then if you're able to apply that, then you in turn put an obligation on states and governments to not only ensure that those rights are protected, but also then international organizations will be compelled to report on the status of those rights. And so that's one way I think we can help to secure the protection of women and indigenous communities in ocean decision making.
Thank you so much, Bola, and I couldn't agree more. But I appreciate your reflections. Any other questions? I see a question in the chat. So from Manesh, how can local and traditional knowledge of the indigenous people be used for adaptation measures against climate change and sea level rise? Are the legal frameworks robust enough to support these marginalized communities in this situation?
I'm not really a lawyer or anything like that, but I can try and answer the question as best I can. It's a really important question, and I think it comes back to also one of the reflections within Auntie Peace's video, where she mentioned how they had been listened to by government officials at times, but then there had been no action thereafter. And I think it kind of talks to both questions actually. That point about people, if they are being heard, that's important, but then if the action hasn't been taken thereafter to actually act on what's been heard and what's been listened to, then it just becomes a situation where you're listening but not acting. And if the legal framework isn't robust enough, if there aren't these sort of legal changes and legal reforms being made off the back of these interventions, then we're not really progressing forward. We're listening, but we're not listening meaningfully or responding meaningfully. I think there's some really excellent examples, particularly from the Pacific, whereby there are legal frameworks which are centred on the customs and customary practices of Indigenous peoples of the Pacific. I'm thinking specifically about the locally managed marine area network as well, which is centred on traditional no-take zones, but as part of a sort of marine protected area programme as well. And again, it's about not trying to take those sort of legal frameworks that are being imposed from, well, basically from Western perspective, and especially things like marine protected areas. It's not about taking them and imposing them and trying to fit customary laws to sort of adapt within those same Western spaces, but instead it's about learning what's already there and what can be worked with as well, because the legal frameworks might not be there from a national perspective or an international perspective, but they are often there from a local and a place-based perspective. So if we're not working through those and not working with those, then we're really missing out on real change that can be made at a local level that can then inform national and international levels as well. I think it's best I can answer that. I think. Does anyone else have any reflections on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, David, you've done justice to that. I should also say from the Ghanaian perspective as well, the laws itself has, the climate change law, for example, is, if we can call it that, very bare basic minimum. So not much thought has been put within the law. There is some policy, but not much thought has been put within the law itself to adaptation and mitigation, and even less thought, I think, even within the policy, the policy that they have on adaptation and mitigation has been applied to ocean spaces. And so much of the discussion around adaptation and mitigation at the moment seems to be focused on land-based solutions rather than ocean-based solutions. And so I think the starting point is recognizing that in our case, for example, a quarter of the people live along the coast. And so the impacts, climate change impacts, are going to be very, very significant and directly connected to the ocean. Antipeace, for example, even though she works in the central region, which is in Armenia, she comes from the Volta region, and the Volta region has been an area that has suffered significant tidal waves, which have been linked to climate change. Much of their land space has been taken, their livelihoods, etc., disrupted in that space. And so fishers have also had to sometimes migrate if they want to continue the profession. And so I guess it's first understanding that adaptation and mitigation must include ocean-based solutions. That's the first, and the law hasn't yet reflected that or caught up with that. And so I guess the law needs to reflect the importance of the space. And as David quite rightly also pointed out, the content of the law itself must not just seek to co-opt local communities into existing law, but actually perhaps a change of how we perceive or how we actually make those decisions, by starting perhaps at the local level and realizing that there are practices and traditions which are already existing, which can be useful. Yes, some of those practices have been disrupted by all sorts of factors, historical, for example, colonialism, but also economic and sociocultural change, but some of them still persist. And perhaps that's the starting point, looking at those practices and cultures and customs that help to already protect the ocean spaces, and then seeing how to build upon that. I think it's maybe a way to go.
Thank you, Bola and David. I think those are great responses. And I just wanted to add to what you said at the end there, Bola. I think it's important to recognize Indigenous and local knowledge alongside scientific research, just as important to inform the climate change debates and ocean decision-making, just like you say, Bola, in terms of recognizing this and learning and listening like we're doing. But yeah, it's really taking that step and realizing that this is knowledge from people that have coexisted with the ocean and the coast for decades, generations. And I think, yeah, already learning so much today and from the people here, but that takes further, yeah, it's brought further as well. Yeah, I don't know, Prof. Alex, if you wanted to say anything.
Yeah, I think in terms of our studies that we've been undertaking, just to reflect a little bit on law, what we've been actually uncovering is that the law, in terms of the marine law, it's like it's not an unknown quantity, Even for those who are in commercial fishing, it looks like the understanding of law is quite limited in the ocean space. So other than the Marine Resources Act, which is being utilized for the allocation of fishing quotas and fishing rights in the Namibian ocean space. And then the other thing that we also uncovered through our studies, through our interactions, not only with the Tokar community, but also with the small-scale fishermen, is the issue of the human rights abuses, especially for the small-scale fishermen. So there have been some kind of discriminations against those who the small-scale fishermen. We've got a Hanganani group, which is actually a small group of people who speak Afrikaans, and also some of them the Maranamas, but they are not necessarily Chopna community. So they complained about some human rights abuses. So then the other thing that we have, the bigger challenge that we have in the Namibian ocean space is more commercial driven and not necessarily driven to support this small scale people like the Toknar community and some small scale fishermen. So this is actually the challenge, and it's like there's so much regulation tied to this Marine Resources Act, and also there's some more recreational driven, where some of these small scale fishermen are not actually allowed to sell the fish. So they catch only for recreation or only for enjoyment. So there's a very small sector of the small scale fishermen in Namibia. And there is an action plan that was just drawn recently and was launched this year. And that document is been circulated. But the one issue about it is that it's more, it's including the rivers, inland rivers. It's not for the coastal community. So the coastal community may not necessarily, it's not really a blessing for them, because it's not only for them. It also includes the inland rivers. So that is the challenge. So what I've noted in terms of ensuring that women are taking part, I've noted in terms of the fishing rights and fishing quotas allocation, that the government has been putting emphasis on the shareholders of those commercial fishing companies. That if you apply for a fishing right and a fishing quota, and you've got more women as shareholders in that a company, so maybe you stand a better chance of getting the rights and eventually the quotas. But for something for the indigenous community is quite limited in terms of the laws. And as I mentioned earlier, the government have started to negotiate with the Toknar community, but that's not going to be on fishing. It's going to be on the Ngara, to have access to places of the hub where the Ngara is growing. So there is some as a lacuna when it comes to the rules and regulation, and that's why maybe our study is also going to focus on the laws and see what can be done to empower the Toknar community from a legal perspective, and also a human rights perspective, and also some small scale fishermen which are locally, are predominantly local. And I don't know if Dr. Tepio would like to make some reflections as our legal expert on this, maybe for a few minutes. I can see Dr. Kapua is here. Maybe you can reflect on this aspect. It seems it's not okay. Okay. Oh, yeah. So that's what is there. So I don't even see that there'll be much change in Namibia, and unless there's a very robust engagement of government to ensure that women are integrated and the indigenous community are integrated into ocean governance. So there is an issue of political cohesion in Namibia, where you should belong to a political party for you to be able to make decisions. Even if you are a woman, you know, you should be connected to a particular party, so that you are an important player in decision making. So this is one of the problems that we have actually identified in the ocean governance space in the context of Namibia. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Prof. Alex, that intervention as well. We only have a few minutes left, but there is another question has been asked, which I think would be quite nice to put to everyone and see where we can reply to this. So Danielle asks, what would you say are the most important next steps to address and amplify ocean climate issues faced in Indigenous communities and in small island developing states that are being overlooked or have not yet been addressed? It's a very big question, but would anyone have any reflections on that right away? I guess I can kind of start with some brief reflections. In terms of, especially from my own disciplinary background, I think understanding the histories of where Indigenous communities and small island developing states have been excluded and how they've been excluded historically, and sort of how that historical exclusion has been reinforced and continues to be reinforced, is extremely important, because I don't think unless we understand that history and we work sort of with the knowledge of that history and awareness of that history, unless we do that, I don't think that we can address and amplify ocean climate issues from that perspective effectively, because we need to know how that process of exclusion has become embedded and institutionalized in things like law and marine governance, especially. It's part of the work that we're doing in One Ocean Hub, and myself, and particularly working with Bola in Ghana around those issues. And I think as we've seen today, every speaker has mentioned the impacts of colonisation on their communities and their communities' rights and access to the ocean. And I think unless we really focus on that and address that and amplify those histories, then we're not going to be able to respond effectively either. And again, that's just the first step. Understanding that history is important, but then it's about working through that history and working with that history to try and find ways to amplify voices and perspectives and methods and move away from the sort of top-down approaches that tend to still dominate the conversation. Anyone have any other reflections? We've got 6 minutes or so left.
Yeah,
I just wanted to add, oh, sorry, Bola, you go first.
No, please go ahead. Go ahead, Mia.
I just wanted to add quickly that it has been touched upon already today, but I think really representation is a huge first step as well. Like we've seen with COP, it's difficult to access in terms of resources and getting there, and the cost and everything. So I also think and for people's kind of connectivity and time and resources, again, I think really getting representation in these decision-making forums and spaces would be a really, really important first step. That also, like, we didn't have to be online here today, or we would be happy to, but that we could get, Chief Brendan and Priscilla to COP, or Peace to COP, like, I think that will be a really important first step, and something that would have to be kind of invested in the future. Yeah, sorry, Bola, you go.
Yes, you've talked about that, and I think the only other thing we perhaps need to highlight, and Alex had mentioned that, it's the question of political will, at the core of all of this, and that's perhaps one of the things that has been quite clear to us in Ghana. Until we have the political will to push governmental actions, then we're kind of limited. But I guess the other part of that is how do we then push political will? Because of course, governments, particularly many democratic nations, will only respond when they feel like this is what the majority of the community wants. And so it's ensuring that those voices are amplified enough, that the voices of those communities are amplified enough that, you know, governments will realize that these are substantial members of a community and we've got to do something about, you know, their concerns. So I guess representation also will then help in that regard, because, you know, if they're able to come together through social networks, through community networks to amplify their voices, then perhaps that can maybe in turn push political will and get some desired outcomes in place.
Thank you, Bola. I think we are at 27 minutes past, so I'm going to start wrapping up there, unless, Prof. Alex, did you have any final reflections to make?
No, I just to say maybe I would have just want to say that from the top Nara community perspective, is that just as Bola has just mentioned, is that if the request, for example, that have been putting to us as One Ocean Hub is to say, in what way can One Ocean Hub assist their community to have their voices as an indigenous community, and not only in terms of the Ngara plant, because they've also lost some IP rights on the Ngara, especially on that part, but also to be part of the decision-making process on ocean governance, because they've been the feeling of being isolated when it comes to ocean and ocean space is quite large among the top community. So there's the international support is quite crucial as well, you know, in terms of ensuring that the top has voices without being connected to a political party, but as a part of a social network to be part of the decision making. That is actually the big request that comes from the top community.
Thank you, Prof. Alex. I've been told we have 1 minute to wrap up here, so I just want to say thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us today and to practice the art of listening. I hope that the reflections that you have heard today will inspire you to continue to reflect on the voices and perspectives that we do need to listen to, and to amplify who are, as we've heard today, who are already justly and sustainably driving ocean climate action, even as other voices seem to continue to dominate the conversation. But for now, I want to thank our speakers and participants once again for offering us their time, whether this morning or in the videos shown, so that we can hear and share in their reflections and knowledge. It's been a real privilege to be able to facilitate this session. And so on behalf of myself, Mia and the One Ocean Hub team, I want to say thank you very much. Thank you to Prof. Alex and to Bola for joining us, and to Chief Brendan and Chrisilla for joining us as well. And thank you to the Virtual Ocean Pavilion for having us and for their support today as well. Take care. Wishing you a good day or evening ahead. Bye.